Hello and a very good afternoon and welcome to the Midday Show. Apologies for being a couple of minutes late. I pressed the wrong button and it all went very wrong. Just from a technology is not on my side, but we welcome immediately to the show our fantastic guest for today, Mr. Jay Saunders. Hello.
Hello, how are we?
We're absolutely fine, thank you very much indeed. It's been we wanted to get you on the show again. For a very long time, really just to get an update on how everything's going for you, because you're involved in such a fantastic drive, I would say, and I really want to, and really just to learn more about it and entertain and educate the listeners too. So you're just explain to us, introduce yourself. Who are you? What's your background, and what are you doing now? And we go from there.
Well, obviously, as you've already put there, I'm Jay Saunders. The main thing people latch onto was the fact that I served in the Royal Navy for 23 years, but I actually spent 18 of those years with the British Army. So I spent more time commanding soldiers than I did sailors. I was eventually discharged in 2019 with complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And I've got into a range of things for my recovery and transition. The most notable of which is how you and I met, Neil, is stand-up comedy.
Yes.
I took up stand-up comedy during lockdown 2. I work with a charity called Project Recce. I'll talk about them in a little bit.
Please do.
But they've got a side project called Project Comedy that me and my friends run, where we encourage veterans to get into stand-up comedy, start performing, either just for their transition or especially if they're wounded, injured, or sick, as a great form of recovery, rebuild themselves, not only with confidence and presence, but break their social isolation and what have you. I'm also a keen archer, and I was lucky enough to take part in the Invictus Games in Dusseldorf last year. So I did table tennis and archery at the Invictus Games. Was lucky enough to come home with a silver medal. As I keep on saying on the stage, I didn't win it. I stole the ruddy thing and ran home with it. But no, me and the boys actually managed to win a silver. I am now an ambassador to the Invictus Games, UK Invictus Games, and this morning they made the official team announcement of who's been selected for the 2025 Invictus Games in Whistler and Vancouver. And I've just been so excited to see all the names of the guys and girls I've been supporting over the last couple of months that have actually been selected to go for the team. So I've just been bouncing on and off my phone all morning going, congratulations, you've made the squad. You're going to have a great time like I did.
Fantastic.
I suppose that's been a nutshell.
It's quite a lot to unpack there. It sounds like you're in a really good way, a really busy man, and I'd just love to unpack literally just virtually every sentence of what you just said there. Starting with because on the Midday Show on Wednesday we do touch on mental health quite a lot.
Yep.
So we hear the terms PTSD. I think it used to be called shell shock, didn't it? Modern day name is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yep.
And I understand it as things being re-triggered, flashbacks and all kinds of unpleasant symptoms.
Those are some of the symptoms, yeah.
Yeah. What is complex PTSD as opposed to just PTSD?
Right. And it's a very subtle difference. It just means it can be slightly more complicated when you're actually coming into management and therapy.
Right.
PTSD, if you go through something traumatic and it causes a fundamental change to your brain, this is the thing that many people don't get. PTSD is not just mental health. It is a full psychiatric disorder.
Right.
It is a cognitive impairment. You have been cognitively disabled. You've permanently been rewired in the brain. So what is normally fight or flight suddenly becomes something very uncomfortable, starts destroying your life. So it is a permanent rewiring. If you go through a trauma and it permanently rewires your brain in that nature, you end up with PTSD.
Understood.
If you go through multiple traumas, then it becomes complex. So it's literally, so if you've gone through one particular trauma, maybe you'll have one or two triggers. If you've had multiple traumas very close to each other, then you can end up with a much broader range of triggers and reactions. That's why it becomes complex and it complicates the way you do therapy, and the way you do management, and sometimes the medications as well.
So there is effective therapy and management for it. I mean, you said permanently rewired,
Yes.
and you're also talking about, you know, rebuilding yourself and healing and recovery. Is it possible to rewire that rewiring?
This is where we need to get better, not just as a nation, throughout the world. If you can capture somebody and get them into therapy within the first, I believe it's 12 to 14 weeks, you've got about a 70 to 80% chance that you could potentially get rid of the PTSD completely. Brilliant. So you don't let that permanent rewire. After 16 weeks, it's more than 85%. You will never be able to get rid of PTSD. You will just learn how to manage it. And each individual, because of their traumas and symptoms, it's how effectively they can manage it. So there is no cure. There is no cure for PTSD. It's, can we prevent it from setting in? Or now, how do we manage it? So for myself, it was several months after I returned from the operation. There's no cure. It is now all about management technologies and going through some quite intensive and uncomfortable psychotherapy and practical therapy.
Yeah, and you're doing well with it. I mean, it seems you're doing well, but I know obviously not all disabilities are visible, and I'm very careful when I say that. But what I mean is, when I meet you, and I've met you more than once, you're very congenial. You seem to have it all together. You're doing loads of wonderful things.
I'm very good at the mask. I'm very good at the mask.
As we all are. As we all are. Well, you are doing some wonderful things. So let's hear a little bit more about that. I mean, it's great that you competed at the Invictus Games. I first met you on the comedy circuit, notably when you came on stage with your dog, which gets a therapy dog, isn't it?
No. Big legal difference in this one. No, he's an assistance dog.
Oh.
So, and again, I mean, I also do some patron work. I'm one of the trustees of the Assistance Dog Council. So we like explaining the difference between what they are. You'll hear three terms in the general public of things like emotional support animal, therapy dog, what have you, assistance dog. The only one that is legally protected in the UK is an assistance dog. And an assistance dog, by definition, changes the behavior of their user in such a manner that they get to lead their daily lives. They're officially listed as auxiliary aids, exactly the same way as damaged legs, you end up with a wheelchair, or crutches, or splints, or what have you. He is absolutely my disability aid. An emotional support dog and a therapy dog are not protected by law. Emotional support dogs or animals make you feel better, but they don't change your behavior, so they're not protected under law. And a therapy dog is something you take into hospitals or wards or old people's homes and make them feel better, make them feel relaxed.
That's a really clear definition of all three, actually. I have heard of the last two. I must admit, before talking to you, I hadn't heard of an assistance dog. So, I mean, he must be incredibly well trained to be able to do what
it took me about, we were very, very lucky with Hawk. So Hawk's my assistance dog. He's a little black Labrador. I managed to get him to the standard in around about 18, 20 months. So obviously you've got the basics of obedience training that you've got to be careful with. I'll come to that in a second. But they've got to do the training, as we call it, PSA, public service access. So how do you guarantee that dog is going to, Labradors, they love eating. They love eating. How do I take him round Aldi, Tesco, etc., without him sniffing the stock and what have you? How's he going to behave in public? How does he behave on a plane, a train, buses, things like that? So that's the PSA. And then you've also got the training of my symptoms and my management. So how will he forewarn me I'm about to have a flashback or a disassociation or an anxiety attack? If I do disassociate, how does he drug me to safety? How does he remind me to take my meds? When does he tell me to go to bed? Those sort of positive reinforcements. So he actually becomes the assistance part of an assistance dog. So
understood. So the basics, I would imagine that would happen with most basic training of a dog to do that kind of thing, but then it crosses the line into, like if you're saying, if he's going to predict that you're going to have a flashback or a disassociation, that's quite advanced and nuanced, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's all positive reward, and then you've got the complicated thing that we call willful disobedience. So, for example, if I think I'm all right, no, I'm not going to dissociate. Go away, Hawk. I don't need you. He will override me and go, no, I'm in charge now. So especially if I do disassociate, for example, and I try to cross the road and it's not safe for me to do, Hawk will automatically drag me off, long arm me to somewhere safer.
Right.
So they do have that element of willful disobedience that, actually, Dad, I'm not happy with you. I'm making you do this.
That's incredibly clever.
And you've seen what he's like on stage. I think he's more relaxed on stage when I'm doing stand-up comedy than we are in daily life, because he'll just suddenly go, oh, Dad's doing that now. He's safe when he's up on the stage. I'll just lay here and know that when I come off the stage, nobody's going to speak to Dad. They're just going to play with me.
Yes, he does love the attention, I must admit.
He's a raging tart. But that's why he's useful for me, because with PTSD, I would isolate. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy doing stand-up comedy. I will hide away and do nothing. Hawk forces me to be sociable. And I love doing stand-up comedy because it's a social activity where I don't burn all my energy socializing. It's very challenging for me to go out socializing, but going out and doing stand-up, I can go out and be social and almost working. So it really does help me with smashing up the social anxiety and PTSD symptoms.
So people with PTSD will isolate themselves, they will shut themselves away.
It's a very, very common side effect of having PTSD.
I do know with most mental disorders, in my limited understanding, I'm not mentally health trained apart from doing a week of NLP, that any psychological disorder is isolating by its nature. You feel that you're the only one, when that couldn't be further from the truth. And to know there's other people, it's really useful to know that you're not the only one.
Absolutely. It's that thing of, go back to when we were talking about the original definition of what PTSD is. It's a cognitive disorder. You don't trust your own brain. You don't trust it to make the decisions you want. So am I suddenly going to flash back in a pub? If somebody comes up behind me, am I going to think I'm back in combat again? Thankfully, my PTSD didn't come from combat, it came from humanitarian aid. These are the guys and girls that I work with. So they don't trust themselves in public spaces.
I understand that in my understanding of it, and please tell me if I'm wrong, because the more we can learn and have conversations like this and get this information out there, the more understanding, the better. So if I'm wrong, for goodness sake, when I did NLP, I learned that we have a conscious mind and an unconscious mind.
Yep.
Conscious mind allows you to sit there and tell me about this completely dispassionately, completely logically, and aware that you have disassociations and flashbacks.
Yeah.
But the unconscious mind, its prime directive is to keep you safe. And if it thinks you're in danger, it will trigger. It doesn't have the critical facility. It can't stop and think. It's knee-jerk, unconscious mind. For example, if someone got bitten by a dog, they see logically they know that not all dogs are dangerous. But they see a dog and the unconscious brings up all those feelings straight away. Is that kind of it, and it feels as real as if it was the first time.
So when you go into a flashback, that is like, for me personally, when I fully flashback, I feel like I am absolutely back there again, but reliving it in close focus and slow motion, and I cannot escape it. So I will see exactly the traumas I went through in absolutely perfect crystal detail. I am there, and it's running at about half speed. And then when I eventually come to 3-4 hours might have passed by, because I disassociate afterwards. The brain just shuts off because it can't deal with it. It is that,
and that's the unconscious protective mechanism again.
Yeah, it's like if you want to go nerdy about it, it's the disconnection between the amygdala and the hippocampus. We've got the prefrontal cortex. That's where we do all our logical thought. We see something,
that's the logical bit,
do some maths. That's the thinking. The hippocampus is your memory store of things that you have done and skills you've got that you can just react upon. The hippocampus, but the amygdala is your fight, flight, and freeze. I've seen a lion. I'm running. I'm going to climb this tree. I'm going to fight. I'm going to freeze. It's a misfire from there, because when you were in that traumatic situation, nothing seems to fix the situation for you. So it runs off and grabs skills that probably aren't relevant to what you are doing. But that pathway is so strong. Every time you see that indicator, wallop, you are back, and it's running back to that skill.
Yep. Yeah. That does make complete sense. Actually, I remember when I was doing some NLP with people, and it wasn't for conditions anywhere near as complex or serious as this, and I will put that disclaimer on it. But the analogy I used, and this was actually a true story. There was a battle, there was a war, and in real life, the soldiers kept on going out to the battlefield every morning, turning up for duty. Turning up for their sworn duty. For king and country or wherever it was. But the point was, the war wasn't on anymore, and to stop them doing it on automatic, it had to be someone in authority, in this case their sergeant, to go out and say, "Thank you, men, for your service and good work. However, you are dismissed because the war is no longer on."
Yeah.
And the metaphor translates to the treatment that I was helping these people with, to say to the unconscious mind, "Thank you for your service. Thank you for finding those skills for me." In one context, it may have been necessary, but now the war is no longer on. So it helps the unconscious mind, I want to say, reframe, rewire. I'm being careful with my terms here, but you get where I'm coming from, yeah?
Yeah, and it's that thing of, too many of my friends, especially you, veteran friends and what have you, don't go looking for the help that they really need, or they're too scared of let's be honest with it, a lot of them, they're too scared to go through the therapy. They'll start off and then run away from it because they don't want to talk about that stuff anymore. And it's, look, we were courageous enough in service. Be courageous in your therapy, having the courage to start talking to somebody and going through the really, really uncomfortable therapy things like exposure therapy, where they purposely take you into a place that will trigger you, but in a controlled manner. Get out there and get the therapy, get talking to people. I've lost too many mates to suicide. I've been an absolute prat. I've had 6 attempts myself. I'm very proud to say that since I got...
Sorry, we froze there for a second. I've had 6 attempts myself, I heard you say.
Yeah. I've had 6 suicide attempts myself. I am very proud to say that since I went off to my first pre-selection training camp for Invictus, I've not had another suicide attempt. So I'm now, I think it's just over 2 years, very nearly 2 years since my last attempt. And I was averaging an attempt every 10 months. About 10 months, what have you. Actually getting out there, doing something to challenge yourself and talking and getting support and doing the therapy, it keeps you alive. It keeps you alive.
So that is what the people need. For anyone watching this, for anyone that's been in the forces, anyone that thinks they might be suffering with PTSD, your recommendation is get the help you need, even if it's uncomfortable. Take the mask off, allow yourself to be vulnerable, talk to people, do the therapy, and do things that place your skill sets and are going to challenge you, like comedy, which we talk about.
The biggest skill you need to develop is get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
you're in trouble. Start talking to somebody. I know you don't want to. I know it's painful. You feel like you're intruding on their life. Start talking to them, because it's so easy to slip downhill, and I've lost too many mates now. So start talking to us. Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Thank you. Have you ever done EMDR? I've heard they use that in.
Yes, I have. It's not recommended now for veteran servicemen with PTSD if they've been in a combat situation. It's and let's be honest about it. We're talking about mental health here and psychiatric illness. PTSD is not exclusive to the military. It's not.
I was going to touch on that, actually. I mean, in traditional therapy circles, they talk about trauma, big T and small t. Mm-hmm. That's just the terminology they use. Now, anyone's been in the military and seen what you wonderful men and women have seen, that would be in their definition, big T. But small t trauma could be something like your girlfriend dumps you, you lose your job, unpaid bills, just the stresses of life, and we respond to those in different ways. And if you're feeling a bit down and a bit out of sorts, things can build up and get to you more than they normally would.
But just as importantly, just because you're not in the military, if you end up in a fatal road traffic accident, if loved one passes away in front of you unexpectedly, if you're assaulted, those sort of things, that's a bigger trauma as any serviceman goes through.
Sure.
So they can end up with PTSD exactly the same way as a service. We do not have the exclusive bracket on PTSD and complex PTSD. It's just our job took us into environments where maybe we ended up seeing things that we could never prepare ourselves for.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter. Trauma is trauma is trauma, and it can affect anybody in the same way as I've got it. So,
and this is the realization in the good parts of the psychiatric community, that they're starting to recognize it's not exclusive to to military people. It can be the little old lady down the road. It could be, like you say, it could be like you say, any of the examples you gave, a loved one passing away suddenly, something like that. There's
some interesting ones of 999 call handlers ending up with PTSD and complex PTSD because of what they've had to manage and deal with remotely down the phone and feeling.
Working in radio, one of my closest friends now, who sometimes presents on here, she was reading the news on the radio. This is during COVID, and she had to stop doing that because it was starting to affect her. She's a very beautiful soul, but a very sensitive soul. We got some wonderful comments coming in, and I really want to share some of these with you.
Sure.
That's from the Midday Show official base. Beginning, praise someone high. Interesting conversation. I'd like to introduce you to Asa Don Brown, Jay. He's been a guest on the show. He's a regular listener, and he's very senior in the psychiatric community in America and in Canada as well. And he's got quite a lot to say. Asa, please let your guests know that I'd love to connect via Facebook and LinkedIn. By the way, my professional training and expertise is trauma. In fact, I had a fellowship in trauma, and my doctoral research was related to the effects of trauma. He also comments that the isolation, hopelessness, and feelings of despair are a common feature of PTSD. He also says it's important to work with an expert in trauma and traumatic stress. I'm hearing, Dr. Asa, actually, and Jay, a lot of therapists, they're calling themselves trauma-informed therapists. That seems to be the lingo at the moment. And he also says, Jay, you're absolutely correct. PTSD can affect anyone at any time. The effects of trauma do not have to occur firsthand, but can be experienced viscerally as well. I mean, I get that. If I watch the news, I was watching the news last night and watching those poor people, and I take no sides here, watching those poor people in Gaza, just the ordinary, everyday people who are affected by war. It's not their fault any more than it's the fault of the people trying to live their lives on the other side of it. But that's trauma. That can be trauma as well. And watching that, I wouldn't say it traumatized me, but I had to stop watching. I was like, oh, don't like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, look at this. Jeff Jones and friends, make it better.
Bless him.
Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the show. Knowing Jay for the last year has really changed my perspective of the power of people. Jeff.
Stop it, Jeff. You'll get me blubbing again.
Well, I tell you what, I don't want to kind of push towards that, but I've only met you twice, and I think you're a great guy. And I don't, and so no more suicide attempts, because you're obviously making a lot of difference to people.
And I think that's one of the best ways to get better is help other people. Don't
underestimate your value. That's what I'm saying, because you're a testament to the power of what is possible. So don't underestimate your value.
You can overdo it. Let's be honest about it. I know, some guys, and I've done it in the past, that I stop thinking about myself, I think about others, and then I don't have to deal with my own issues. It's got to be a balancing act. But one of the great things...
Yes, it has. And it's all about balance. I've studied a bit on this, because I try and do an awful lot for other people. But then you can start to experience something called compassion fatigue.
Yes.
It's that put your own oxygen and end stage compassion fatigue. You can end up like a bloody zombie, dead-eyed with nothing left to give, burned out.
Totally.
So it is a balance. So self-care has to come first. Put your own oxygen mask on, in the old plane metaphor. Yeah. And two, self-care is imperative. It's not selfishness.
Absolutely. But it also, where it's so helpful is it puts you back in context. When you are going through the traumatic moments, or you're going through the flashbacks and disassociation, it feels the world has come to the end and you're having the worst experience that could ever be possible. Then you start helping out your mates that are going through the same sort of thing. You went, I couldn't deal with that. I couldn't. Yeah. And it brings you back into a level of recovery. It could be worse. By helping my mate out of that, not only feel great that I've helped my mate, but I don't have that and I'm not gone through that. So let's get some perspective. I am not in the worst situation in the world. There's worse happening out there. So that it's kind of humbling to help them out. And that's why I love doing things like the stand-up comedy. Now I'm an ambassador for Invictus and what have you. And go, I sure as heck ain't perfect, but let me promise you, if you stay on the journey, things start improving for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about your comedy. I've seen you twice. Sorry, I've seen Hawk twice.
Yes, yeah, that's quite right.
With you as the sidekick. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm his emotional support human.
Yes, indeed. Both on the Hampshire circuit when I was playing some gigs in Hampshire. And I saw you for the first time and I thought you were really personable and really good. And then I saw you for the second time at what's his name?
Guns N' Roses in Copner.
Yes, Switchblade. What's his name? Roseblade.
Matt Roseblade.
Thank you, Matt Roseblade. Yes, Puns and Roses. And coincidentally, I was giving Callum Brennan, who's the blind lad, a lift down. We're on the same bill, and we just got talking because we were talking about his guide dogs, and we were talking a little bit, and I learned about guide dogs and how they were trained and all that sort of thing. And I said just off the top of my head, oh yeah, there's this other chap who has a dog. His name's Jay, and he used to be in the forces. And I walked in the door, and there you were.
Yep.
Well, wait a minute, that's a bit of a coincidence. And then I saw your comedy that night, and I mean, I thought you were good before, but my God, you've grown in your comedy chops, mate.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
very much so.
It was comedy has been. I'm going to say it's been a lifesaver. It's enabled me to do so many other things.
Yeah.
It's brilliant with PTSD. I think it's so healthy. How
does it help with PTSD? I think I asked you this on the night, and I said something probably like the dumb questions you get asked every day, but comedy's not comparing it as scary as what you've been through, but comedy is quite scary. So how does that help with PTSD? And you gave me a brilliant answer.
It's that thing that it's harder for me, and this is a truism. It's harder for me to go into a supermarket and buy food for myself than it is to stand up and do 15 minutes of comedy in the corner of a pub to a bunch of strangers. Because when I'm on the stage, I can predict what's going to happen. I know what my routine is. I know when people are going to laugh. I know what's going to happen when I come off the stage. I can't predict any of that in a supermarket. So since lockdown 3, I've only successfully made it into a supermarket 5 times.
Right.
So but where is it? It's a chance to be social without having to be sociable. You know, it breaks your social isolation. You get instant rewards. This is the joy of stand-up. It's the perfect art form. Your audience responds immediately. You don't have to wait until the end of a 2-hour play for the round of applause. If they laugh as soon as you've done something with it.
Yeah.
But I think the most powerful part about it is when you learn stand-up, it's all about getting to the funny fast. It's how many times can I make them laugh in a minute? What's my punchline rate? So when you're writing comedy, if it ain't funny, you throw it away. So when you're going through those dark moments and what have you, you can open a word processor, chuck it all down, and you go, that's not funny. And you find yourself weeding out all the negative, all the horrible and what have you, and you're just left with the funny. And the funny can be as dark as you like. I mean, you've seen with my stuff, I take the mickey out of my assistant's dog, my PTSD, suicide attempts and what have you. But as long as what's left on the page is funny and you're punching up, not punching down, I find it's brilliant self-therapy because you're literally editing your own thought process.
I love the way you've compared it to that. You're essentially I'm beginning to understand more why the performing arts in general can be such a great healing tool. You're not the only one I know who's on a healing journey in the performing arts. I personally love comedy very, very much. And I can completely understand that. But if you're kind of doing your own self-editing and you're only, if you like, rewiring while you're on stage, that's amazing, number one. It's also amazing, number two. I like what you said, that you feel completely in control, because I suppose any situation that will cause trauma, people will feel out of control. Yes. Hence the response that we were talking about from the unconscious mind, which is screaming, I've got to keep you safe, even if the war is not on anymore, so to speak. Yeah. So I can understand the therapeutic value in that. And you're right, you know your set, you can predict it. Well, it's predictably unpredictable, isn't it? It's unpredictably predictable, predictably unpredictable. You know what I mean?
What are you going to do with a heckler? What are you going to do if you forget a gag? What am I going to do if Hawk suddenly wrapped him around my legs 4 times, as he did when I did my first pro gig?
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a degree of unpredictability in it, but I know how the night's going to finish. I'm going to come off the stage and see the other comedians.
Exactly. So even within that uncertainty, you still feel grounded and in a sense of self-possession and control.
And this is why we found Project Comedy, thanks to Project Recce, has been so useful. Because let's be honest about it, my first couple of times.
Tell us about these, by the way. I'll put the websites on the screen. So give us websites as you go along.
So the main website is projectrecce.org.uk. That's our parent charity. They focus
RECCE.
Yep. They focus on enabling the veterans community to get into the construction industry. Anything from being a labourer on a building site to the project manager for HS2. Something like, they do the entire raft of employment opportunities, training, and exposure within the construction market. Obviously, we went through the lockdowns. The construction industry stopped. So just for a short period of time, a short-term project, they set up Project Comedy. Let's learn some stand-up comedy online. So if you go to that website, you will find a page in there for us as Project Comedy. We are still running all these years later because we've found so many benefits of doing comedy. Everything from increasing your self-confidence, being able to edit down to your editing skills get better because you trim out stuff you don't need. Presentational skills, communication skills, connecting with an audience, connecting with your customers. We joke about it. Why are people so terrified about doing a job interview? If you can do a 5-minute stand-up comedy set, how easy would it be?
Any job interview, yeah.
Exactly. The transferable skills are enormous. But the first few times you do stand-up, I'm sure it's the same for you, mate. Terrifying. You didn't know what's going to happen. How am I going to make this a success? That's the joy of Project Comedy. We meet up minimum once.
I was very nervous the first time. Very nervous.
We wouldn't let somebody go to the stage until they're funny and they've got a minimum of 8 jokes a minute. We start every one of our comedians on a minimum of 8 punchlines a minute.
That's quite a high GPM.
Yeah, but it's possible. We've been given such great skills and transferable skills from Jay Sodegar and Laughing Horse Comedy. They are such huge.
Long-time friend of mine, Jay Sodegar. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, Jay is. Well, he still drops into our green room, still drops onto our podcast as a guest and what have you. And Jay's turned around and went, I can't give you my entire course, but you can teach him X, Y, and Z. And Jay is still dropping in, meeting the guys and girls that we are training at this precise moment. And so many of the guys and girls that join us go, I'm just going to turn up in your green room and have a laugh with you. And they do that 3 or 4 times and they go, well, I've started writing some material. Come on, then share the material. And then they're building more and more, and you see them go, do you know what? I might get on the stage soon. And I think one of these people is supportive.
Being in that atmosphere, the magic can happen. When I do, as you can see, I teach DJing. So if that's ever any use to you or your crew, let me know, and I can show the evil arts of DJing. But I'm very happy to do that if you ever wanted that. But what I'm saying is, when I do the DJ lessons around here, and there's a bunch of people who are enthusiastic about it, and it's like the creative energy is flying around the room, and sometimes magic happens, and there's breakthroughs, and confidence. This is dexterity is taught, being able to split your attention is taught, confidence is taught, music knowledge is taught, work in a room is taught, and all these, again, like you say, transferable skills. And you blend in a bit of that creativity and the magic happens. I think Einstein said creativity is intelligence having fun. I think he was right.
And it's that thing of, because we got a shared commonality, we're all veterans that are in Project Comedy. We'll end up writing material for each other. We'll go, this is absolutely down. We've all got the same skills, but each one of us is a very, very different comedian. And we'll suddenly go, oh, mate, would you like to polish it this way? And we'll hand jokes off to each other. And it's so much fun to support your fellow comedians on the circuit.
Oh, it is. I mean, I must admit, I don't write that closely with people, but I wish I did. I mean, I would like to have a really good writing group. Unfortunately, when I tried writing with someone, he was very kind of possessive about anything he thought of, and it was just absolutely impossible to work with. But the way you describe it is absolutely fantastic.
And for any veterans out there, we hopefully will be sticking out another. We've just paused on the episodes at the moment, but we've got 3 seasons now of the Project Comedy podcast, which is available out on mainly through Spotify, but it's also on Apple Podcasts and what have you. What we do there, it's comedy for comedians. We actually take a subject in comedy and then rip the piss about it. You know, stand by. We're all veterans on this podcast, so stand by for some fruity language and what have you. But we'll do things like what is punching up, what's punching down? How do we find material? What do we get concerned about cancel culture? How do I get my punchline rate up? And we take one subject, and then the 3 or the 4 of us analyze it and have a good laugh about it. It's comedy for comedians with a focus on the veterans community, especially the wounded, injured, and sick. But it's explaining what stand-up comedy as a business really is. And
also, because I remember having this conversation with you when we were at Puns and Roses as well, and you said, I don't know, is it this project or is it another one? But there's a podcast that you do where you pick a subject and discuss it to the hilt. That's the similar bit. But then try and find a solution to it at the end.
Not for us. What you're talking about is another great podcast out there that we've just been linked into. That's Jeff Jones and Friends Make It Better. Can't recommend that podcast highly enough. So what you do is you go in with an annoyance, you talk it through, and at the end of it, you find a solution to it. So massive call out to Jeff Jones and Friends. It's an amazing podcast to listen to. Jeff Jones.
Because a lot of podcasts, and I love that because one of my little side hustles is I edit podcasts for people. So I get to listen to a lot of podcasts. Just going to put that on the screen properly. Right, there we go. And what I found with some podcasts is they're very good at pointing out the problem, but there's no kind of resolution at the end of it. So they make it very clear that, yes, it's a problem. Yes, it's a big problem. And then we all feel bad that there's a big problem, but then they don't focus on the solution. And when you said that to me, when we had that conversation, I'm like, that is just brilliant.
And I think that's one of the hooks we've got with the Project Comedy podcast. I mean, Jay Sodergore and Laughing Horse Comedy now recommend our podcast as recommended listening after you've done any of their courses. And that's for the beginners, intermediate, and pro courses. Because we take one subject, we beat it to death, but the takeaway of every single episode is this is possible, guys. It's not terrifying as you think. It's far more comfortable thing once you've got over that first initial stage fear getting on the first time. Yeah. And if you're disabled, if you've got mental health problems, psychiatric issues, impairments, and what have you, stand-up is still a valid art form for you, and you can have an amazing time on the circuit doing it. Look at me. I'm a raging lunatic, and I've just done my first ever professional gig, and I ended up opening for Bobby Davro, of all people.
I was going to bring that up. Yes. How did it go?
I was terrified. I mean, it's sort of like, it was like going back to my first series of gigs, because I knew at the end of the night, a collection of tenors was going to go into my hand. I'm being paid. I'm being seen as a professional. It's billed as a professional show. And I've got to warm an audience for, okay, let's be honest about it. Bobby's audience are automatically going to love him, but I've got to make sure they're warmed up before he comes on to do his piece.
Yeah. Were you the only other act on? Or was there more?
We also had an MC as well, the legend that is Nick Coppin.
He's another Laughing Horse veteran.
Yeah.
I know him.
Nick was the MC. We've been friends for a few years now. We met at the Brighton Fringe Festival when Project Comedy took we took a show to Brighton for 3 nights and ran our own 1-hour show just purely of veterans. We called it Gags Army.
Gags Army, very good.
So it's 3 veterans running a 1-hour comedy show. So we met Nick there. Yeah, it was. The audience couldn't have been nicer. Soon as I got through about my second or third punchline, I went, "Oh, they're with me," and I was able to relax into it and you start using those skills. As a comedian, how do I ride this laugh? I'm not going to deliver a setup whilst they're still laughing and what have you. It's being able to ride and connect with your audience.
Yeah,
pick the people, Pick the people that you know are going to be able to bounce off and make a punchline better for you. It was stunning. And then all three of us, we got kidnapped by the audience at the end. I'm so glad I put my phone on silent, mate. I feel very professional now. But no,
Sorry.
the audience kidnapped us, would not let us go. They had to stay around, and they couldn't believe it was my first gig. And Bobby couldn't have been nicer to me. He's just there going, I can't believe that is your first ever pro gig. It's like you've been on the circuit for so much longer. Get out there, do more, and suggest you do.
But I would agree, and I can't speak from a seasoned pro like Bobby Davro because I'm not at that stage. But I'd seen a massive growth in your comedy from the twice that I've seen you. I mean, I thought you were pretty good before. And I was like, oh, this is next level now. When was this? It was relatively recently, wasn't it?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah. At the moment, I'm focusing on my next big life change. I am potentially working with a charity called Forces Veterans Afloat, whereby, so at the moment, as you could probably see, this isn't a caravan. I live on a 45-year-old yacht on the south coast of England. I've been living like this for the last 6 years, just personal circumstances, and it's not working for my health.
Right.
I am going to be working with this charity, Forces Veterans Afloat, where I potentially, and hopefully this weekend, everything ticks its boxes, be transferring to a narrowboat. They're going to give me the loan of a narrowboat for a minimum of 12 months, so I can gather some cash together, sell this, and buy my own narrowboat, and then take comedy and archery on the cut. Because if you look at the major cities for comedy, Manchester, Birmingham, Nottingham, London, Oxford, they're all on the canal network. And that hopefully will be my next big thing, is move on to a narrowboat and go, as I'm calling it, comedy on the cut. Travel the country doing stand-up.
That sounds fantastic.
I think it's going to be one of the most exciting things I can do for myself, physically, mentally, and again with things like Project Comedy, I'll be able to be closer to people and supporting them and what have you, and setting the example, I suppose, of it. To be good at comedy, to be successful at comedy, it's get out there and gig. There's nothing replaces getting out there and gigging and writing material.
No, the amount of time I thought something was funny in my head, and then normally after a few beers, and then try it the next day and like, oh, that's not. And then sometimes just off the cuff, well, I'm not even really trying. Oh, that really was funny. I didn't expect that to be funny.
Yeah.
I've got an AB. I don't know how you do it. I've got a ABC list or red, amber, green list, if you like. Red, nah, not funny. It goes. Amber, got something in it but needs work, and green, stay straight in.
It's this is the joy of us having the green room with Project Recce, Project Comedy. We all come with new material and run it past each other, so we'll help each other polish it. Or because we're veterans, suddenly one of the guys will go, "Whoa, you ain't taking that to the stage. That's too dark. It's punching down," and what have you. So we end up being like a check mark for each other. So there's a better way you could put that, or don't use that term, etc.
Yeah.
We can check mark each other before we get to the stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's relatively few limits in stand-up comedy, but it does have some.
We've got a golden rule. There is nothing you cannot joke about. It's how you tell the joke.
Yeah.
If you tell the joke to hurt somebody or hurt a group, it's not a joke. That's evil form of politics. If you're punching up, there is nothing you cannot joke about. It's how you tell the joke and the intention of the joke.
Yes, if it's cruel or said with a deliberate intention to be nasty, then I would agree. But I think comedy, sometimes it needs an edge. Sometimes it's the whole point of being able to laugh at things we're not really supposed to laugh at, isn't it?
Oh, so look, I tell jokes about suicide. I tell jokes about mental health. I'll refer to myself as a spacker because somebody has called me a spacker, so I can turn around and use it back as a joke.
Yeah.
You can still be on the edge. You can still challenge. And remember, this is stand-up comedy. This is not watching TV comedy or TV stand-up shows that have been sanitized for terrestrial broadcast. We can be so much closer to the edge on the physical circuit. And that's the joy of it. Be dark. There's nothing wrong with dark humor. Talk about controversial things because there's funny in it. If you're trying to hurt somebody, no, then you stop being funny. You're not being funny now. You're trying to impose views on people.
Yeah. No, and I wouldn't consider that's comedy. That's not taking the piss. That's not even particularly funny. I agree. Well, I tell you what, we've got some fantastic numbers on the show today. There's people loving this discussion. Let's have a look, see if we've got any more comments coming in. There we go. Another one from Dr. Asa. Jay, it's pretty cool what you're doing with the comedy and the podcast. Oh, here we go. This is an interesting one from Dr. Asa. After all, we all have comedy within us, but many are afraid to release their humour.
Yeah, because there's difference between telling jokes and being a comedian. We've all been told a load of jokes and what have you, and we recite them. I mean, it was the classic thing that used to happen to us in barrack rooms, crew rooms, mess decks. Somebody's told us a joke, and we'll tell a shaggy dog story to somebody because it's safe. It made me laugh the first time. When you're creating your own comedy, you get it becomes very precious to you. It belongs to you. What am I going to do if they don't laugh? Well, the truth of the matter is, find a group of friends, test it on them. If they don't laugh, it's not going in your set. But you'll be staggered by the things that you come out with will make them laugh. So you do need, I think this is true of anything, especially with mental health. We need a collective around us. You need people around you to bounce things off of, because otherwise you just...
That is so right. Yeah, I completely agree. I would add you need the right people around you.
Absolutely.
That have your back and don't have, their own agendas and all that sort of thing.
Yeah,
I mean, if need something from you when you've got nothing left to give.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this to if there are any veterans out there, mental health issues, physical issues, or just standard discharge, any of you interested in stand-up comedy, get in contact with us. Instantly get in contact with us, join us, come and have a laugh with us, because that's what we're there to do. We'll show you. I can't teach anybody to be funny, but I can show them how to be a comedian. You know what's funny, and then tell it to a bunch of dark veterans in a Zoom room, and we'll go, that's freaking funny, mate. That may need a bit of work.
So I missed that. Is this open? This is just open to veterans, though, is it?
Project Comedy is there for the veterans community. Right. Yes. Yeah. And let's be honest about it. We have to be parochial about it, because we've seen too many, especially on the mental health side of life, things go wrong for veterans. I mean, it's ironic that veterans are not looked after by the MOD in this country. The Americans have the VA system.
Because I thought all these wonderful things you were doing was from the MOD or from the government, but it's
the not. Second you are discharged, the only veterans care out there is either the NHS or charities. So if it weren't for the likes, I work with amazing charities, as we just said, Project Recce, they've helped me out with this. Royal British Legion, they're the people that took me to Invictus. Help for Heroes, they helped me get qualified as an archery coach. Walking with the Wounded have helped me with my mental health and socialization, and food banks when I ran out of money. First Light Trust have enabled me to do X, Y, and Z. C2U, all the care us veterans get comes predominantly from the charitable sector. So that's why we have to protect. It's going to sound horrible. We have to protect our money. We've got to get bang for our buck. So we address the thing we know the most about. I don't blame you.
It's just a shocking indictment on the country, isn't it? I mean, I know more about it now, but I knew that a lot of people that had served in the forces and should have the most care were just discharged, and they end up homeless and hopeless and on the streets. I was in a conversation with a friend about it, and I'm like, but these people deserve the and it's just like, well, thanks for your service, bye. Really?
But there are some great charities out there. We do our little bit, as Project Comedy, Project Recce. They do amazing work, because one thing that helps out veterans is being able to find a stable career, stable income, and what have you. And Project Recce are so successful at getting people in. Do I want to be in the construction industry? Actually, when you look at the construction industry and how broad it is, it could be anything from, as I said, a labourer. Maybe you want to get an HGV license and be delivering to sites. Maybe you want to be a project manager. Maybe you want to be a sparking. Maybe the construction industry is so broad
Yeah.
And they've got so many amazing ins with companies like Balfour Beatty, etc., etc. That helps out. And then we fill in the backspace of when we were in the military, we had an organized sports and social life. And you leave the service and that's not looked after for you. In Project Comedy, we show you how you can be sociable again and actually fill that gap of what am I going to do of an evening? How am I going to be constructive? Well, that's where we slot into it.
Brilliant. And I'm glad they exist. When's your next gig or next gigs?
Haven't got one booked at the moment. My main focus at the moment is obviously potentially this move that could be happening fairly soon. But I focus on my Monday nights where we get the Project Comedy guys through because we've got 4 new students going through, dropping in and out, learning the skills and what have you. And especially supporting mates of mine like Jamie Johnson. He's our first character act. Jamie's a fellow ambassador in Project Comedy. He was originally just a standard stand-up comedian. He's now created a comedy character called Josiah the Monologue. He doesn't realize he's a failed actor, but he went to RADA, and he's constantly correcting people about how you should be acting and doing comedy.
Very good.
And Jamie's having a great success out on the circuit around the Stoke area and what have you. And I'm also designing our new website, which we're hoping is going to go live fairly soon.
Fantastic. What will the domain for that be? So I can pop it on the screen.
We don't know yet because we haven't confirmed on that. We're hoping it's going to be projectcomedy.org.
Let me know when you know. Let me know, and I will plug it on the Midday show and on Radio Jackie as well, because I think that's their.
But you can, if anybody's interested, you can follow Project Comedy on Facebook and on TikTok. So we got a Facebook group there called Project Comedy. You'll see a green saluting soldier with a microphone. Exactly the same logo on TikTok. And I've got my usual social media channels at Comic J, just the letter J Saunders. But feel free to follow us. But look for Project Comedy or look for Comic J Saunders. We're out there, and I'd be willing to help any veteran considering getting into stand-up.
Is it, Comedy Jay Saunders or just J?
So Comic, COMIC, just the letter J, Saunders.
I'm going to pop that on the screen. Can I just say congratulations on everything that you've done and everything you're involved in, and thank you as well for the service that you've given to, or are still giving, and did when in the forces.
You'll find it with every veteran. That's not something we take very well. But I guess that's why we get into things like Invictus and comedy. Thank you. Well done, silver medal. I can take the plaudits for the silver medal. That was a really good set. I can take the plaudits for that. But the rest of it, helping each other out, what we did in service, we're really bad at taking compliments and thanks for that. It's a big difference when I went to America and they turned around and say thank you for your service. And when I was doing the Invictus Games in Germany, people were coming up going, you could spot the Brits, because soon somebody went thank you for your service, suddenly they'd run away and hide.
Is that a British thing? Is that
very British? We hide away from it so much, but the Americans, the Germans, the French, they love it. We are awful at it.
Yeah, I know. It's a very British thing. No, mustn't take compliments. Mustn't think too much of myself. That is very typically British, isn't it? Yeah. It's something I've been working on breaking. But well, thank you ever so much for being
delight as always, mate. Delight as always.
And please keep in touch. Come and be a guest again on the show at some point.
Love to.
In the future. I was going to put this comment up from once again from Ace Storm Brown. I would love to connect if you fancy it via Facebook and LinkedIn. His professional training and expertise is trauma. I had fellowship in trauma, and my doctoral research was related to the effects of trauma. And I've had the pleasure of talking to Dr. Ace on this show, and he knows of that which he speaks. He's a very intelligent man, so and a really nice guy as well. So there's that. Have you heard of havening, by the way, as a treatment?
No, not one I've heard of.
What might be worth looking at, and if you think there's something in it, maybe sharing it. I read it in a Paul McKenna book, and it's a psychosomatic therapy, which involves a gentle stroking of the arms, which creates delta waves in the brain, which unblocks the neural pathway where the door is like jammed open, if you like, which means a trigger can bring back that experience, like you described in PTSD. This removes the block, and it's allowed to, I'm not explaining this terribly well, but but the result of it is people can think the traumatic thought and it would have no more emotional impact than should I have beans on toast or chicken pie for dinner. It wouldn't have that awful feeling associated with it. I remember a story. He'd worked, Paul McKenna had worked, because this is all tested out in the field, on a war veteran who'd seen, like you all have terrible scenes, but they actually cured his PTSD within an hour with this, which I read about, and I was like, whoa. So that's always worth talking about. It's in the Paul McKenna book, the one he's written on confidence and charisma. There's also one called The 3 or 5 Things to Change Your Destiny Today, and I think he's talked about havening in both of those, because it can be used to get rid of smaller blocks as well as the big ones. Apparently, it's always worth mentioning if it can do that. Worth knowing about. I'm going to pop this one on. One more, Jeff Jones and Friends to Make It Better. Knowing Jay for the last year has changed my perspective of the power of people, from Jeff. So
and do listen to his podcast. It's absolutely brilliant. I've been a guest on that. We ended up doing a special for PTSD Awareness Day. So there were the 3 of us with PTSD. So my mate, Rich, Gabe and I. So one guy I did the Invictus Games with, and Gabe, fellow ambassador from Project Comedy, all 3 of us about PTSD. Apparently it's one of his most popular episodes. It's quite a long one. We go very, very dark, but we make people laugh all the way through.
Absolutely brilliant. I'm definitely going to listen to that and listen to yours as well. And if I can assist anything podcast wise, is what I do. So just give us a shout. But hopefully we will share a stage again at some point fairly soon.
Mate,
right?
Can't wait to do it. Can't wait to
Where
do
I can
it.
sing about Wetherspoons and Hoovers.
And let's be honest about it. It's all about the dog. It's just an excuse to go and see my Labrador, and that's what people turn up for.
If you say so, but I have to say your comedy was pretty good as well. I have to say, hawk or no hawk. Jay Saunders, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I hope to see you in the flesh again soon, and take the best of care and keep in touch. And when you know your website domain, let me know and I'll give it a plug on here, or we'll have you back on.
Brilliant stuff.
Take care, my friend. All the best.
And you take care, all.
Bye-bye. Wow, that was pretty cool, wasn't it? Oh, I've been looking forward to having him on. What a lovely guy. And I tell you what, his comedy, it's very, very good. When I saw him when we were down at Puns and Roses in Hampshire, and I think he was just tweaking the final bits for the pro show he talked about with Bobby Davro. And I was listening to it. I was like, oh yeah, this is very, very good. So I know we're all British and a bit self-deprecating, but I can boast for other people. It's been great audience numbers as well this afternoon. So obviously you've enjoyed the show as well. So thank you very much for tuning in. Just enough time to let you know that Russ and Co will be back on Friday. It'll have Jonathan Bez, TV critic, Chantal Ricard, Screen Queen, and Phil Dave, who is Russ's presenter, on Friday. And I will be back Monday with Russ, and then next Wednesday with my own show. And I think we will get Jay back on at some point, because he's a brilliant guest. And when he books some gigs, if you do get a chance to see him, I absolutely recommend that you do. And he has a very cute dog as well. So there you go. Ticks all the boxes. Right, we've got about 1 minute left, so I'll just see if there are any comments that I've missed. Thank you, Dr. Asa, for your comments on that. I really do like you chipping into the show, because I enjoy getting your point of view on things. It's good to hear from a professional point of view, because I only have a layperson's understanding, so it's good to know that I'm getting bits of it right, but understanding more and more every day. Yeah. Stuff from Dr. Asa. Isolation, hopelessness, and feelings of despair are a common feature of PTSD, and indeed many mental. Well, actually, Jay was saying, caveating that it's a full cognitive rewiring. It's not a mental illness as such, but even with mental illness, it can feel very isolating. But I think the more conversation, you think you're the only one, but you're not. It couldn't be further from the truth. And I think there's so much relief knowing that you're in the same boat as other people, if not maybe in the same storm. And even that can help with feelings of isolation, loneliness, and shows like this, where we have open conversations. We talk and we listen to each other, and we increase the amount of knowledge in the world, and hopefully give you a bit of a laugh as well. So on that note, time for me to bust out of here. I still haven't heard from that scammer that I busted the other day. If you have any scammers, don't fear them, send them to me, and I'll just have a bit of fun with it and then broadcast it for all to see. In the meantime though, Russ and Co are back on Friday. This has been Neil Long. Thank you ever so much, and thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of the Midday Show. Take the best of